The rain was coming down like bullets that night, each drop hitting my windshield with a violence I'd never experienced before. I'm telling you this story because what happened next defies every rational explanation I've ever believed in. My name is Marcus, and I've been a paramedic for 15 years. I thought I'd seen it all: car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I encountered on Highway 42 that October night. The storm had rolled in faster than the weather reports predicted. One minute I was driving home from my shift at the hospital, thinking about the leftover pizza waiting in my fridge, and the next, I was gripping my steering wheel like my life depended on it. The wind was howling so loud it sounded like a freight train was bearing down on me. Trees were bending at impossible angles, and I could barely see 10 feet ahead through the torrential downpour. That's when I heard it, cutting through the chaos of the storm like a knife through silence. A child's voice, desperate and terrified. "Help me, please." The scream was so raw, so filled with genuine terror, that it made my blood run cold. I immediately pulled over, my heart pounding. In my line of work, you develop an instinct for when someone's life is truly in danger, and every fiber of my being was screaming that this child needed help now. I grabbed my emergency flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked me over, and the rain felt like ice picks against my face. "Where are you?" I shouted into the darkness, but my voice was swallowed by the storm. Then I heard it again, closer this time, that same terrified plea. "Help me, please. I can't find my way home." Following the sound, I stumbled through the muddy shoulder of the highway, my flashlight beam dancing wildly in the wind. The voice seemed to be coming from the woods that lined the road. As I pushed deeper into the treeline, branches clawed at my jacket and face, but I kept moving toward that desperate call. That's when I saw her, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, huddled against a massive oak tree. She was soaking wet, shivering uncontrollably, wearing what looked like a white nightgown that was now translucent from the rain. "Hey there, sweetheart," I called out, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring despite the chaos around us. "I'm here to help. What's your name?" She looked up at me with the most haunting blue eyes I'd ever seen. There was something about those eyes. They seemed older than they should have been, like they'd witnessed things no child should ever see. "My name is Emma," she said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I got lost. I can't find my mommy and daddy." I immediately took off my jacket and wrapped it around her tiny frame. She was ice cold, and I could feel her little body trembling against mine. "It's okay, Emma. I'm Marcus, and I'm going to help you find your parents. But first, we need to get you somewhere warm and dry." As I picked her up to carry her back to my car, something strange happened. For just a moment, the storm seemed to quiet, as if the very act of finding this child had somehow appeased whatever force was driving the tempest. But as we made our way back through the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. How had this little girl ended up alone in the middle of a storm, miles from any houses? And why did she seem so calm now, almost eerily peaceful, as if she knew something I didn't? Getting Emma into my car was like bringing a ghost in from the cold. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, wrapped in my jacket, staring out at the storm with those unnaturally calm blue eyes. I cranked up the heat and handed her a bottle of water from my emergency kit. "Drink this, sweetheart. It'll help warm you up." She took small, delicate sips, never taking her eyes off the windshield where the rain continued its relentless assault. "Emma," I said gently, "can you tell me where you live? Do you remember your address?" She turned those haunting eyes toward me, and for a moment, I felt like she was looking right through me, seeing something I couldn't understand. "I live on Maple Street," she said quietly. "Number 1247. It's the White House with the red door and the swing in the backyard." I knew Maple Street. It was about 20 minutes away under normal conditions, but in this storm, it would take much longer. As I pulled back onto the highway, I tried to make conversation to keep her calm and gather more information. "How did you end up out here, Emma? Were you with someone?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it over the storm, she said, We were driving to see my grandma. There was an accident. My blood ran cold. An accident. I immediately started scanning the road for signs of a crash, skid marks, broken glass, damaged guardrails, but the storm made it nearly impossible to see anything clearly. Emma, where are your parents now? Are they hurt? She just stared out the window and whispered, I don't know. Everything went dark, and when I woke up, I was alone in the woods. I grabbed my radio to call dispatch, but all I got was static. The storm was interfering with the signal. Cell phone service was down too. We were completely cut off. Don't worry, I told Emma, though I was starting to worry myself. We'll get to your house, and we'll figure out what happened to your parents. Everything's going to be okay. But as we drove through that hellish night, more questions began eating at me. If there had been an accident, where was the wreckage? Why hadn't I seen any emergency vehicles on this stretch of highway? And most disturbing of all, how had a little girl survived what sounded like a serious car crash and wandered into the woods in the middle of the worst storm I'd ever seen, only to emerge without a scratch? When we finally reached Maple Street, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. The street was completely dark. No streetlights, no porch lights, no signs of life anywhere. It looked abandoned, like a movie set after filming had wrapped. I drove slowly down the street, counting house numbers by the dim glow of my headlights. 1241, 1243, 1245, and then 1249. There was number 1247. I stopped the car and double-checked the numbers. 1245 was a small blue house, and 1249 was a brick colonial. There was no white house with a red door between them. Just an empty lot overgrown with weeds and debris. Emma, I said, turning to look at her, are you sure this is the right street? I don't see 1247. But when I turned around, my heart nearly stopped. Emma was gone. The passenger seat was empty except for my jacket, still warm from her body heat. The doors were still locked. The windows were still up. She had simply vanished into thin air, as if she had never been there at all. That's when I noticed something that made my hands shake. On the passenger side window, written in what looked like condensation from her breath, were the words, "Thank you, Marcus. Now you'll understand." I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at that empty passenger seat, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My jacket was still there, still warm, still smelling faintly of rain and something else, something sweet and floral, like the perfume my grandmother used to wear. But Emma was gone, vanished as mysteriously as she had appeared. The storm was beginning to subside, and I could finally get a cell signal. With trembling fingers, I dialed 911. This is Marcus Rodriguez, paramedic ID 4471. I need to report a missing child and possible car accident on Highway 42. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the static. Marcus, we haven't received any accident reports tonight. Are you sure about the location? I gave them all the details. The child's scream, finding Emma in the woods, her story about the accident, the mysterious disappearance. But even as I spoke, I could hear the doubt in my own voice. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? The dispatcher assured me they'd send a patrol car to investigate, but I could tell they thought I was either mistaken or suffering from exhaustion. Unable to just drive home and pretend nothing had happened, I decided to go back to where I'd found Emma. As I drove slowly along Highway 42, the storm clouds were finally breaking apart, allowing shafts of moonlight to pierce through. That's when I saw something that made me slam on the brakes. Skid marks on the asphalt, barely visible but definitely there. They led off the road and into the tree line, exactly where I'd heard Emma's voice calling for help. I followed the skid marks with my flashlight, and about 50 feet into the woods, I found it. The twisted, burned-out wreckage of a car wrapped around that same massive oak tree where I'd found Emma. But this wasn't a fresh accident. The metal was rusted, the windows long since shattered and scattered. Vegetation had grown up through the chassis. This car had been here for years, maybe decades. My hands shaking, I managed to make out part of the license plate, MBL 4792. I took photos with my phone and called the police again. This time, they took me seriously. Within an hour, Highway 42 was lit up with flashing lights as investigators combed over the scene. Detective Sarah Chen, a woman I'd worked with on several emergency calls, pulled me aside. "Marcus, I ran that partial plate number. This car was reported in a fatal accident 15 years ago. October 14, 2010. A family of 3, David and Margaret Blake, and their 8-year-old daughter Emma, were driving to visit Margaret's mother during a severe storm. They never made it. All 3 bodies were found in the vehicle." The world seemed to tilt around me. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I just had Emma in my car. I talked to her. She told me she lived on Maple Street, number 1247. Detective Chen's expression was grim. "Marcus, I checked the address. 1247 Maple Street was the Blake family's home. It was demolished 5 years after the accident. The lot's been empty ever since." As the investigators worked, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The storm that night was hitting on the exact same date as the original accident, October 14th. The same highway, the same weather conditions, even the same time of night. But none of that explained how I'd seen Emma, talked to her, felt her physical presence in my car. Detective Chen showed me the accident report file. There was a photo of the Blake family taken just weeks before the accident. David was tall and serious-looking with kind eyes. Margaret was beautiful, with long blonde hair and a warm smile. And there, between them, was Emma, with those same haunting blue eyes that had stared into my soul just hours earlier. "There's something else," Detective Chen said quietly. "According to the original investigation, Emma's body was never found. David and Margaret were trapped in the front seats, but the back seat where Emma had been sitting was empty. They assumed she'd been thrown from the vehicle, but despite extensive searches, they never recovered her remains." As I stared at that 15-year-old photo, Emma's words echoed in my mind. "Thank you, Marcus. Now you'll understand." But understand what? What was she trying to tell me? I couldn't sleep for 3 days after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, heard her voice calling out in the storm. I'd taken some time off work, unable to focus on anything except the mystery of what had happened. Detective Chen had been keeping me updated on the investigation, but so far, they'd found nothing that could explain my encounter with Emma. That's when I decided to do some investigating of my own. I spent hours at the county library, digging through old newspaper archives, looking for anything related to the Blake family accident. What I found made my blood run cold. This wasn't the first time someone had reported seeing Emma Blake on Highway 42. The first documented sighting was in 2012, exactly 2 years after the accident. A truck driver named Robert Hayes reported picking up a little girl in a white nightgown during a thunderstorm on Highway 42. She told him her name was Emma and that she needed to get home to Maple Street. When he reached the address she'd given him, 1247 Maple Street, the house was dark and appeared abandoned. When he turned around to ask her about it, she was gone. In 2015, a state trooper named Maria Santos reported a similar encounter. She'd been patrolling Highway 42 during a severe storm when she heard a child calling for help. She found a young girl matching Emma's description in the same wooded area where I'd found her. The girl claimed she'd been in a car accident and was looking for her parents. Officer Santos drove her to Maple Street, but when they arrived at 1247, there was only an empty lot. The child had vanished from the locked patrol car. There were 6 more documented cases over the years, all following the same pattern. Always during storms. Always on or around October 14th. Always the same story. Emma Blake, 8 years old, lost and looking for her parents, needing help getting home to 1247 Maple Street. And in every case, she would disappear once the Good Samaritan reached the address, leaving behind only the lingering sense that something profound had just occurred. But there was something different about my encounter, something that set it apart from all the others. In each previous case, the person who helped Emma had experienced some kind of major life change within weeks of the encounter. Robert Hayes, the truck driver, had quit his job and started a non-profit organization helping runaway children. Officer Santos had left the police force to become a child psychologist. Every single person who had encountered Emma Blake had gone on to dedicate their lives to helping children in crisis. As I sat in the library, surrounded by these newspaper clippings and reports, a terrible understanding began to dawn on me. Emma wasn't just appearing randomly. She was choosing specific people for a specific purpose. But why me? What did she want from me? That's when Detective Chen called. "Marcus, I need you to come down to the station. We've made a discovery at the accident site that you need to see." Her voice was tight, strained, like she'd seen something that had shaken her to her core. At the police station, she led me to a conference room where several evidence bags were laid out on the table. "We brought in a specialized team to excavate around the accident site," she explained. "We found these buried about 10 feet from the car." She pointed to one of the bags. Inside was a small, tarnished locket on a delicate chain. "This belonged to Emma Blake," Detective Chen continued. "Her mother Margaret was wearing it in the car when they crashed. But here's the strange part. According to the original accident report, Margaret Blake was found wearing this locket when they recovered her body. So how did it end up buried in the woods?" She pointed to another evidence bag. "And we found this too." Inside was a child's drawing, protected in a plastic evidence sleeve. It showed a family, a man, a woman, and a little girl, standing in front of a white house with a red door. At the bottom, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "My family. I love you. Emma Blake, age 8. "Marcus," Detective Chen said quietly, "the paper this drawing is on? It's not 15 years old. According to our forensic analysis, this drawing was made within the last week. The crayon marks are fresh. Someone, or something, has been leaving these items for us to find." As I stared at that innocent child's drawing, the pieces of the puzzle finally began to fall into place. Emma wasn't trapped at the accident site. She was choosing to return, year after year, looking for people who could help her complete some unfinished business. But what was she trying to accomplish? And why did everyone who encountered her end up changing their lives to help other children? The answer, when it came to me, was so simple and so heartbreaking that I felt tears welling up in my eyes. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt as I sat in that police conference room, staring at Emma's drawing. She wasn't lost at all. She wasn't trying to get home to a house that no longer existed. Emma Blake was doing something far more profound and selfless than I had ever imagined. I called Detective Chen that evening with a request that must have sounded insane. "I need you to help me research something. I want to know about every person who reported seeing Emma over the years. Not just their initial encounter, but what happened to them afterward. Their whole life story." What we discovered over the next few days confirmed my growing suspicion. Robert Hayes, the truck driver who first encountered Emma in 2012, had been struggling with depression and alcoholism after losing his own daughter in a custody battle. His meeting with Emma was the turning point that led him to get sober and dedicate his life to reuniting missing children with their families. His nonprofit had successfully helped over 200 families in the past decade. Officer Maria Santos had been on the verge of quitting police work after a series of traumatic cases involving child abuse. Her encounter with Emma gave her the strength and purpose to pursue her calling as a child psychologist. She now runs a treatment center for traumatized children and has saved countless young lives. Every single person who had met Emma Blake went on to become a guardian angel for children in crisis. Teachers who started programs for at-risk youth. Doctors who specialized in pediatric trauma. Social workers who fought tirelessly in the courts for children's rights. Emma was somehow identifying people who had the potential to make a real difference in the lives of vulnerable children, and her mysterious appearances were the catalyst that set them on their destined paths. But there was something else, something more personal that I was only beginning to understand about my own encounter with Emma. 3 days after that stormy night, I received a call from my supervisor at the hospital. "Marcus, we've got a situation. There's an 8-year-old girl in the ER, victim of severe neglect and abuse. She's not talking to anyone, Won't let the doctors examine her. She keeps asking for someone named Marcus. We thought you might want to try. When I walked into that hospital room and saw the little girl, thin, bruised, with the same haunting blue eyes as Emma Blake, I understood. This was why Emma had chosen me. This was the child I was meant to help. Her name was Sophia, and she had been through horrors that no child should ever experience. But somehow, in that moment, I knew exactly what to do. Over the following weeks, I worked with Sophia, helping her heal, helping her trust again. I testified in court to ensure her abusers were prosecuted. I helped place her with a loving foster family. And that was just the beginning. Sophia was the first of many children who would come into my life, each one needing the specific kind of help that only I could provide. I realized that my 15 years as a paramedic had been preparing me for this moment. All those emergency calls, all that experience with trauma and crisis, had given me the skills to reach children that others couldn't help. Emma Blake had seen that potential in me, just as she had seen it in all the others she had chosen over the years. The final piece of the puzzle came to me 6 months later, when Detective Chen called with news about the Blake family investigation. Marcus, we found something else at the accident site. Buried deeper than the other items, almost like it had been there since the original crash. It was Emma's diary, a small pink book with a tiny lock, somehow perfectly preserved after 15 years. The last entry, dated October 14, 2010, the day of the accident, read, "I'm scared about the storm, but Mommy says we have to go see Grandma because she's sick. I wish I could help all the kids who are scared like me. Maybe someday I will find a way." Emma Blake had found her way. Even in death, she had become the guardian angel she had wished to be in life. She was using her supernatural presence to identify and inspire people who could carry on her mission, protecting and helping children who had no one else to turn to. As I write this, it's been 5 years since that stormy night on Highway 42. I've helped over 150 children in crisis, and I've started a foundation called Emma's Angels that trains first responders in pediatric trauma care. Every October 14th, I drive past the site where I found her, and I say a silent thank you to the little girl who changed my life and the lives of so many others. I've never seen Emma Blake again, but I know she's still out there, still appearing to those who have the capacity to make a difference. Because some spirits don't rest, they serve. And Emma Blake's service will continue as long as there are children who need protecting and adults with the courage to answer her call for help. The storm that brought us together was just the beginning. The real miracle was learning that love transcends death, and that sometimes the most profound purpose comes from the most unexpected encounters. Emma taught me that we're all connected, and that sometimes, when we think we're helping someone else, we're really being guided toward our own destiny.